no one even knows that on May 29th, far left extremists were firebombing the White House and St. John's Church.
They were putting Secret Service guys in the hospital. Those guys were catching bricks to the head.
70 plus injuries, 100 or 100 plus injuries,
Yep.
you know, and nobody even knows about it. And the anti-Trump guy had this, like, he immediately darted over and looked at me with his, like, what? Like, he didn't know about it.
There were people that were hiding in the statues. They have some of these things that are like big chalices that are in Lafayette Park. And I actually found out as I was leaving DC, because I lived in DC for 5 years. I worked at the Washington field office. That was my my backyard. Some kid who was doing an inspection on my roof as we sold our house. He was like, "Oh man, I was at the White House like on that day, and I was hiding up in this thing, and I thought Secret Service was going to get me." And I was like, "You're telling this to an FBI agent?"
Yeah, but he knows. He knows he's good.
And there's nothing I could do about it.
Yeah,
because we are not encouraged to be able to take proactive means. Like that guy admitting that basically he was involved in that riot. It didn't go anywhere. How many charges do we see?
So let's throw it to Garrett to elaborate on that question. It seems like, you know, I saw a video of a guy, 3 FBI agents show up to his house asking him for information on one of his neighbors, and he's like, not happening.
Right.
And so it does seem that it is the I guess what would you call it, rank and file, regular old FBI.
Yeah, rank and file, yeah. So Kyle mentioned Police Battalion 101, and there's a book called Ordinary Men by a guy named Christopher Browning. And it has stood out to me for a number of years now, but it really, I guess, came to the forefront of my mind when I was in new agents training in Quantico. So every new FBI employee is taken on a field trip to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and it's an extremely powerful experience. And the entire point of that trip, the director of the FBI speaks to your class at the end. The whole point of the trip is don't forget the past so we don't repeat it.
It's put on by the ADL for whatever that's worth.
What?
Just letting you know.
Yeah. And,
it's actually a good trip. But
I thought it was a great trip. But, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but on the wall, when you walk in, one of the walls, it's a poem from a Lutheran pastor, Martin Niemöller, and it's the one that essentially says, you know, first they came for, you know, the communists and nobody spoke up. And, you know, at the end, then they came for me and nobody was left to speak up. And it's real big on the wall. I remember seeing that. And I remember just thinking in the context of law enforcement, it's a preeminent example, because this Ordinary Men story, they were butchers and carpenters and they were reserve cops, right? And so they have their ordinary duties and then they get activated because the war is starting to kick off. And this particular group gets sent to Poland. And in July of 1942, they get orders to start executing all the Jews in the town. And what do?
They just do it?
They just do it.
They got to the point where people who were moving too slowly to get onto the boxcars were getting shot in the back of the head, old people and toddlers, because they weren't, and these are ordinary men. That's the story. And so the story of tyranny, and this is the thing that I think Garrett and I were so scared about. Garrett and I didn't know each other in the FBI. We never worked together. Okay. There's another guy named Steve Friend who's part of our little kind of collective. We call ourselves the Suspendables. It started off as a joke. The Suspendables started off as a joke because we saw the Sly Stallone movie, The Expendables.
Right.
And we're like, well, we've all been suspended. We can't come back to our job. So we're the Suspendables. And that was an inside joke to ourselves. We wrote a letter to the FBI director, an open letter with 45 questions. Why not? Because Trump was number 45. We thought that was a funny number. It was literally just kind of an FU number.
Yeah.
So we write up 45 questions for the FBI director. We put it on Twitter. It ends up going viral. And then the New York Times wrote a hit piece, really, talking about the Suspendables. And when the paper of record starts talking about your organization like it's a real thing, you're like, I guess we're a real thing. Now we have it. So we got merch. we grabbed the website and went after it. But when you are in that category of people, we didn't know each other. We never worked together. We all just saw the exact same problem. And every single person that's ever come forward that I've talked to that has been in the FBI in the last little bit, they cite the Holocaust trip, the going to that memorial museum. You can walk through there. You smell the shoes of the people that were killed. They have a room that has something like 800,000 shoes. It's just like, it's overwhelming. It's a large room. You walk through the central little corridor. There's glass walls on either side of it. And it's just piles and piles and piles of shoes that they took out of one of the camps. Those were people's lives that were destroyed because government officials didn't say no. They said, okay, my job, my paycheck, my pension, I've got a family, I got a mortgage, I've got health insurance I need to pay. All the things that we're seeing that the current FBI agents are doing, they're showing up on arrest warrants for guys who are like pro-life protesters, like Mark Hout, who was in Philadelphia. And basically some guy said the worst things you can imagine to his 8-year-old son at the time. And Mark Hout was a football player in college. He's a big dude. And he threw the guy on the ground. Like, imagine if you're a father, and I've got 4 children, and Garrett's got 4 children. Somebody comes up to my 6-year-old and starts putting some like horrific, swear words and some really graphic language that's really awful, saying things about their dad. They're probably going to experience some physical violence from me. And it may not be that well restrained. I thought Mark was incredibly restrained. And the DOJ came even after the local authority said, this is just a spat between 2 guys. One guy had instigating language. The other guy got physically, and he was very restrained. That's the end of it. The FBI came and investigated that, and they came after him under the FACE Act, which is crazy. It's fully crazy. And now we're sentencing people in D.C. That's currently happening right now. We just sentenced a bunch of pro-life protesters that were praying the rosary.
I think it was like a 70-year-old woman.
Yeah, one was 71, one was 78, and there was a guy who was 41.
They gave her a decade, I think.
Well, it's still. I don't know if they've been sentenced yet. I know that they've been convicted.
They're facing.
They're facing major.
I think a couple of them did get sentenced.
I'd have to pull it up, but it's atrocious.
Yeah, it's
evil.
It's
evil.
And it's 2-tiered. That's the real crazy thing.
And
if
then
that was because here's the other thing. The FACE Act actually has the 4th clause of it says that it protects the free access to churches. So if you're obstructing access to a church, then you're not allowed. Then you have the same violation. That's the same crime. But look at the number of people from Jane's Revenge that were like firebombing pregnancy crisis centers, or going after Catholic churches and defacing the tabernacles or stealing, any of the relics. That should also have the same thing. If we saw equal justice, people would go, I guess don't screw with churches and don't screw with abortion clinics. That would work out okay.
It's 3-tiered. You have far leftists who firebomb buildings, no charges. The guy you arrest, laser. So people need to understand about these lasers. When you point at a helicopter, they can cause temporary blindness. That means the helicopter crashes.
It refracts inside the windshield of the helicopter. And so they can't see where they're going. We're talking about a helicopter that is the only helicopter that's allowed to fly over the crowd on the presidential inauguration.
And that's a big deal. They want the crash. They want the news. They blame the government. So he
went to American University, by the way, and was part of one of the Antifa cells there, I'm pretty sure, because that's where all the organizing for Disrupt J20. I know you guys talked about it. We were talking about it as well, but there was a big push to try to stop the inauguration of Donald Trump, which we've already forgotten about that insurrection.
So you have this tier where they actively commit crimes, then for some reason just get let go. You then have the middle ground tier where if you are a regular American facing crimes that only the feds can handle, you are ignored completely. They're not going to bother you. They're not going to waste their time on you. They're not going to help you either.
These are like white collar. Like imagine if you have a business. Let's say you guys got defrauded out of $500,000. They might pick it up.
Nope.
But if you got defrauded out of $200,000, I know they wouldn't in this area.
I had a circumstance where I was told that $1 million won't move the needle for the FBI.
It depends on the area. There are places where $1 million will. So in New Mexico it might, but in this area $5 million. Where you?
So to keep it vague, I'll keep it as vague as I can. I had an issue which was, I believe, an issue over $1 million across multiple states. And we were told explicitly it won't move the needle for the FBI. Have a nice day. And I'm like,
in the districts you guys are in, that's correct.
That's crazy. But obviously we're on the ass end tier where they're basically like, we don't want to help you. We want to find a way to lock you up.
Right.
But then you have the third tier, which is, they want to lock you up. So they'll come knock on your door and they'll say, we're not here investigating you. Could you tell me what time it is? And you'll be like, I don't know, it's 1 or something. Aha, you lied to the FBI. It's noon. You're under arrest. Like Michael Flynn.
That's a felony. So Garret worked on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. He got to see this stuff in Kansas, which is a pretty red area.
Yeah.
And so you can see who they go after with that.
Yeah.
Well, the Michael Flynn thing, right? It was like an informal interview.
Yeah, it was a perjury trap.
He was hanging out. My understanding is that it was not a formal interview where he thought he was being investigated or anything like that.
Garret can comment on this as well. I was trained at the FBI Academy. We never use 18 USC 1001 as a standalone charge. It's not a standalone charge. Yep. It's something you use to add. So we pile it on. It's like, not only did you do this fraud and not only did you do this other terrible thing, but also you lied about it. And now we have an additional felony. And so we have more leverage on you. It's like getting charged with 5 felonies is better than 1.
Yeah.
If you're going to go and try to push them to a plea.
I've gone into interviews when I was an FBI agent. And I used that threat of 1001 with the person I'm talking to, because by the time you get to that point, if you're doing your job correctly, you probably already have them on a 1001, or you're confident you will, because you have done so much due diligence to get to the point where it's like, okay, now I'm going to go interview the subject of this potential crime. And I would lead with that. Like, hey, if you lie to me, that is an additional charge. And they'd always say, yeah, I know.
What was the routine for you guys? I mean, obviously, when you're in the FBI, it's not like you're hunting down, seditionists or anything, or insurrectionists. There's like what's like the most common thing you would deal with?
Everybody gets assigned to different types of cases. So he was working terrorism. I was working Chinese threat. My first 2 years.
Wow.
Which is the worst thing in the world. It's the most boring thing you can do. I did FISA. I basically looked at, you've heard of FISA 702. There's a lot of coverage about this. We can talk about it maybe long form a little bit. But I read FISA 702 for a living. It's the most horrible thing for an outdoor kind of guy like me to be sitting behind a desk for 10 hours a day and reading Chinese emails. Like, I don't speak Chinese, by the way. I don't read Chinese. We finally got this gal to our squad. This is the brilliance. Everyone thinks that the FBI is like like this mastermind diabolical thing. It's more like Forrest Gump. Like sometimes they get it right, and a lot of times it's just retarded. And so we end up with this situation where I get a Chinese linguist analyst, and she's assigned to the desk right next to me. It's perfect. She's on my squad now. I'm like, oh, good. We've got Chinese FISA, got Chinese linguist. It's good stuff. So I'm like, yeah, I've got these emails. Can you tell me what this says real quickly? Just eyeball it, whether it's worth my time. I'll send it off to the linguist for professional translation, whatever. And she was like, oh, I can't read Chinese characters. I just speak it. And I'm like, wow. I'm like, everything I get is written. Every single thing I get is in written digital copy. So that's the brilliance of the FBI for you.
But not only that, I'm sure a lot of the emails were like, hey, did you pick up the milk, bread, and eggs?
It's spam. I read spam. Like think about what the volume of your email is. Imagine if there was no filter and you got all of it. Yeah, it's all spam.
It's emails
so it's would you like to take a cruise? Have you thought about the Penghu Islands? It's like, oh, it's garbage.
Yeah, I get a lot of Donald Trump emails.
So there's that. I mean, that's what I did doing Chinese CI. And then I spent 3 years doing surveillance where I looked at a little bit of everything, but I wasn't the guy who was the case agent. I was looking at stuff. And we have some bad guys out there. There's some legit terrorist subjects who do some weird things. None of the legit terrorist subjects that I've seen have ever been arrested. The ones that were the scariest, that were armed, swore allegiance to ISIS, going out and doing like firearms training in the middle of the desert and like getting themselves ready to conduct an attack and had already said that they wanted to like put their life on the line for Allah. Those people have not been arrested.
Is that because they want to let them commit the crime, catch them, and then have them lead them to the next big...
They're totally incentivized to have an overt act and getting someone to do an overt act. But, the other thing is like I used to work a lot of white supremacists, and you'll find what they'll do is a white supremacist on average, in my experience, and I have 3 years and thousands of hours of watching people in that category. It's like it's a 20-something-year-old kid who may or may not be in college, who wears loafers and khaki pants and a polo shirt and is drinking a latte at Starbucks, and he's like rage texting or tweeting, and he's saying shitty things on Reddit, and he's a racist maybe. And then when you put an undercover into them, which costs tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, plus my surveillance team, which would cost, just on salaries alone, $10,000 a day for a shift for 8 hours. They'll go like, hey man, do you want to do some real racist stuff and like go kill some cops or something? You want to kill some black cops? And he's like, no, I think I'm going to like get a job and like maybe meet a girl and hold hands with her. Like they don't want to do the thing they say online. It turns out they're keyboard warriors.
Yeah. There's a funny meme about that where a guy posted on 4chan that he was posting spicy memes and pictures because he's just antagonizing.
Or shit posting.
And then he's like, feds showed up at my house, and when they realized I'm just like some fat dude who sits in the living room and plays video games all day, they apologized and left.
Now they'll arrest you. Like Douglas Mackey's in jail for that.
What did he do?
Oh, right.
He made Trump memes that said, if you want to, I think the allegation was that he deprived people of their ability to vote.
Because it was like text
because
to vote.
You could text your vote. I mean, you might as well just say, look, if you love Hillary Clinton, go yell at the moon and we'll record it.
Yeah.
It's the same stupidity.
Yep.
And nobody has I don't know.
It's like the first time someone's been charged for something like this.
It's a clear.
They claimed that he was it was disenfranchisement or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a conspiracy against rights.